Welcome to the Story Corner. I'm Kesta, Chief Storyteller around here, and if you like a good book, you've come to the right place. Today, I am going to be reading to you from Nean McKenzie's book, Cryptosight. It's a mystery story, and if you have a look at the cover, you'll see that the cover is also very mysterious. You can see there's an animal of some sort there, but it's not obvious what it is. And it says on the front cover, "What if you could see what is hidden?" And then there's a quote here from Judith Rossell, another children's author who you may or may not know, and she says, "Imaginative, unpredictable, and very exciting." And having read it myself, I have to agree with Judith. I'm going to read you a little bit of the blurb on the back cover just to give you a heads up about what it's about, and then we'll get going. Rafferty Kaminsky is a 13-year-old who believes in facts, not like his cryptozoologist father who searches for creatures not proven to exist. When their father disappears in the Flinders Ranges, strange things start happening to Raph and his younger sister Zara. They learn that their father belongs to a secret organisation and they are suddenly being pursued by bunyip hunters. So, let's find out what it's about. Now, last year I was lucky enough to go along to Nean's launch. This is Nean's first publication, so it makes it extra special. There's her signature. It's always nice to get a signed copy if you can. And she has a dedication in the front for Murray, Skye and Finn. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Before I start, I should just let you know there are no pictures in this. So if you would like to lie back with your eyes closed and relax as you listen to the story, feel free, go ahead. If you like to sit up and watch the screen as we're reading, then of course do that if you like. Or if you've got your own copy of Cryptosight, then feel free to join in to read along as I read. Chapter 1. Cryptozoology, the study of hidden creatures. The cicadas were silent. Rafferty Kaminsky stopped, so still he could feel tiny particles of dust settling on his skin, damp with sweat. The absence of sound rang loud in his ears, but it was what he felt in his body, from his kidneys to the tips of his hair, that bothered him most. Although he couldn't see it, there was something in the bush watching him. "Zara!" His voice came out cracked and high. "Zara!" Trying to sound more confident, or at least not so scared. There is a scientific explanation for everything, a rational, sensible reason. Day 3 of their dad's cryptozoology training, and already Raph was losing the plot. He'd believe in sea monsters or even lizard people if he didn't concentrate on the facts. A dark shape moved at the side of his vision, and Raph's head swivelled, his eyes searching the pattern of shade and light between the scrubby gum saplings. Nothing. "Zara!" Raph broke into a fast jog along the path, flanked by prickly grass trees, then stopped. Someone was running through the trees towards him. "Guess what I found?" Zara's small face was triumphant below her curly black hair. Any relief Raph felt at seeing her again quickly changed into irritation. "Why'd you run off? You know Dad told us to stay together." At 13, he was only 2 years older, but far taller than his tiny sister. Zara gave Raph a measured gaze. "It's a competition, remember? You didn't expect me to go at your pace, did you?" Her green eyes scanned his face. Then she frowned. "What's the matter with you? Did you see something back there?" "Oh, it was nothing. Probably just a wombat or something." That shape had been way too large, too heavy, for a wombat. But what could it have been? Zara didn't notice his hesitation. So, don't you want to know what I found? Just listen. The heat of the midday sun scorched Raph's scalp through his sandy hair. His ears became sensitive to little sounds, like the creak of the gums and, from far off, the warble of a magpie. Then he heard it, faint but unmistakable, a sweet sound carried along on the warm, still air. What's a Mr. Whippy Van doing in the Flinders Ranges? I don't know and I don't care. Zara grabbed his hand and pulled him along the path. All I know is it's ice cream and I don't want to miss out. As he trudged along towards the sound of Greensleeves, Raph blew a fly off his lip and winked another from the corner of his eye. He knew that flies only lived an average of 21 days, but in his opinion, that was way too long. Anything that could turn solid food into liquid by vomiting on it was truly gross, and not in a good way, although he'd take a fly over an ant any day. An image of the shadow in the bushes flickered in his mind, but he pushed it aside. The campground was in sight, although it was not a part of the campsite he'd seen before. Parked in a clearing between spindly paper barks was a white van with the side open. A queue of children stretched back towards a small village of identical tents. Must be a school camp, said Zara. Maybe the ice cream's just for them. A man in a ranger's uniform of khaki shirt and shorts walked down the line, passing out ice creams to the children. He had red hair and beard and wore gardening gloves on both hands. Would you like an ice cream as well? He asked Zara. Yes. Zara held her hand out. Hey, wait your turn, said a freckled girl with spiky hair. She turned to the ranger. Those kids aren't even on our camp. There's plenty to go round. The ranger chuckled and passed an ice cream to Zara. No point in starting a riot. Here's one for your brother as well. Thanks. Zara held both ice creams, licking stray drips from the cones. She gave one to Raph. Part of Raph's brain wondered whether they should be accepting food from a total stranger, especially one who was wearing gardening gloves. Were they even clean? And how did he know he was Zara's brother? They didn't exactly look alike, but the dryness in his throat took priority. He grabbed the ice cream from Zara and wolfed it down. He closed his eyes for a second, enjoying the sweet coolness sliding down his throat. So, said the ranger, it's lunchtime. If you're not on this camp, you'd better get back to your parents. He smiled, but not with his eyes. The test! Zara shoved the rest of the cone into her mouth and shot off like a startled lizard in the direction of their campsite. Raph knew there was no point in following her. He'd never catch up. He didn't really want to anyway. Zara cared more about winning than he did. Thanks for the ice cream. Raph turned to the ranger, but he was nowhere in sight. Raph scuffed the toe of his runner in the dust as he followed Zara. As a cryptozoologist, his dad Max investigated sightings of mysterious animals that, in Raph's opinion, didn't exist. Raph always tried not to listen as Max talked about people who could only be weirdos, who'd seen anything from the Loch Ness Monster to the abominable snowman. He didn't want to hear. But a couple of days ago, his dad had apparently decided he and Zara were ready. They were now at an age when they could start their cryptozoology training. Max had finally convinced their mum Vivian to let him take them on one of his investigations. Vivian was heading up to the Gold Coast for a genetics conference, and Raph and Zara had gone with Max to the Flinders Ranges. No one had asked Raph where he'd rather go. The challenge had been their dad's idea. Max had tied blindfolds on both of them early that morning in the campground before loading them into the car. "No peeking," he said to Zara. "You'll ruin the game." Raph made a face as he bumped along in the back seat, dust tickling his nose. He wished, not for the first time, that his dad was just a bit more normal. Normal families played games like Monopoly or mini-golf. They didn't blindfold their children and drop them off in the middle of the wilderness to find their way home. They'd got out of the car at a spot surrounded by thick bush. There was no sign of the campsite. "What if we get lost?" Raph's blue eyes went grey with worry as Max removed the blindfold for him. "Or bitten by a snake, or abducted by strange people. Shouldn't we be supervised by adults?" Max ruffled his son's hair, the bright sunlight glinting off his spectacles' thick lenses. "Tell me the 5 rules of survival I taught you," he said. "Go on." "What, out loud?" "Humour me." Max's pale, freckled face wrinkled into a smile, but his eyes were serious. "It's important." Raph sighed. "Number 1, always take a torch. Number 2, always protect your family. Number 3, wear clothes with lots of pockets. Number 4, really looking for things is the only way to find them. Number 5, in case of emergency, leave a backup in a safe place." "Excellent." Max rubbed his hands together. "There's a 6th one about eating important items if you're searched, but let's hope you don't need to know that one." Then his dad turned to Zara and handed her something. "First one back to the tent wins," called Max. And then Zara was off, and Raph was after her, trying to keep up. She was always going to win. They were just lucky she'd run in the right direction. Back at the tent, Zara slumped in a camp chair, looking sleepy. "Where is he?" Raph ducked his head under the tent flap into the warmth. Zara shrugged. "Dunno. Car's not here. He left us sandwiches, though." Zara pointed to the table as Raph zipped up the fly. "No note?" Raph peeled the lid off the plastic container and wrinkled his nose at the cheese and Vegemite sandwiches, then closed the lid again. He collapsed into the other chair. As he sat, he could feel his body temperature rising. It was like a heated swimming pool in the tent, but he could hear the flies buzzing outside. He wasn't about to go out there with them. "So, I won!" Zara smiled, stretching out her legs in front of her. "I just felt which way was right." She stroked the shell necklace she wore around her neck. "Lucky guess," said Raph. His dad knew he wasn't into cryptozoology, but he convinced him to do the training. "For Zara," he'd said. "She's the one who really needs to do it, and she needs someone sensible like you to look after her." Raph had agreed on one condition, that he could buy a mobile phone. He'd saved up the money, but his father had never let him. Max had a theory that all technology was decreasing the ability of human beings to cope with normal life. He didn't even own a mobile phone and had no laptop or TV. But Max had said if Raph could prove himself, he'd let him get his own phone. Raph yawned. "I wonder where he is." He stretched and got up from his chair, feeling incredibly tired. He collapsed on top of his sleeping bag and closed his eyes. The sun shone through the tent onto his face. He could see pink through his eyelids. He turned over onto his side, resting his cheek against the palm of his sweaty hand. Maybe it was the morning of bushwalking and the midday warmth, but he was so tired he could hardly think. All around him the bush, even the birds, seemed lulled into silence. He fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He awoke to Zara pinching him and pulling the hair on his arms. He's still not back. Zara sat beside him, her face troubled. She twisted her small fingers together. I've got a bad feeling about this. Raph sat suddenly upright, swallowing the queasiness that rose in his throat. He forced his fuzzy mind to think. He stood up, head spinning with the sudden movement, and unzipped their dad's section of the tent. It was empty. His bags were gone, all his clothes, everything. All that was left on the tent floor was a dusty outline of where his sleeping bag had been. And that is the end of the first chapter. So we'll leave it there. If you enjoyed the start of the story, feel free to have a look for it in your local library or perhaps at your local bookshop, or maybe look online at some of the online bookstores. I know for sure you'll be able to get a copy yourself there. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will see you next time with another story. Bye for now.